fingertips above the water. You watched me drown. You could have saved me, but you let me down, yeah.
So first, congratulations, my friend, on the FM station that is now, or the addition of the FM band with, is that the FM band with Beaver County Radio.
Well, thank you. Thank you. That was a big accomplishment, about a 3-year project.
You kept it pretty secretive, though, because I only found out right before it happened.
Well,
you did a good job there, pal.
It's that whole public comment period that you...
Okay.
Well, I think and I'm going to try and get this straight. In 2016, I believe, the FCC decided they were going to help out existing AM radio stations and make what they call the translator license available to all AM operators.
What's a translator license? Translator
is a type of FM license that's tied to an existing traditional AM broadcast. So, unlike a new full-service FM allocation, the translator is always going to be a simulcast of its FM counter or of its AM counterpart. Okay. So they decided that all the existing AM radio operators in the United States they could apply for one. Didn't mean you were going to get one, but you could apply for one. And as long as your research and the coverage patterns that you proposed and everything seemed like it made sense, and you weren't going to trample on somebody else, you could probably get awarded one. and along that line, it's much easier to get one out here out in Beaver County, where our stations are, than it would be, say, in Pittsburgh.
Okay.
Or if you got awarded one in Pittsburgh because there are so many other radio stations and so many other things in the way, the coverage area might be a little bit more limited because a translator can't interfere with an existing radio station.
Okay.
So, in 2016, they made that rule that was going to happen, and in 2017, they had a year where you could buy an existing translator that was already out there and move it.
Okay.
There was a year of that. So translators had been around for a while.
All right.
And you could have bought a translator that was awarded in, I believe, the other side of the country, move it to your location, the license per se, and fire it up with your AM signal, pending the coverage area and all that worked out.
Okay.
And then in 2018, they allowed for everyone that didn't already have one to just go ahead and apply for one.
Okay.
So we had the opportunity to buy a translator or two. We were approached, and I decided, well, there's no harm in waiting because we sort of knew that they were going to allow this open application period.
Got it.
And that was a good decision to make because it all panned out.
Right.
So in January of 2018, the FCC awarded us what they call a construction permit.
Okay.
Basically, it was a provisional license, if you will. You have 3 years to put this thing on the air. And the one that we got for WBVP was 99.3 megahertz to broadcast at 492 feet in the air at 250 watts.
Okay.
Based on what the engineer had designed for us. We hired an engineer out of Bowling Green, Kentucky, by the name of Chuck Anderson. And I don't know, Chuck has some real whiz-bang equipment, and he's one of those real smart guys. And he knows he was able to design the coverage patterns.
Okay.
Just plugging them into his equipment, knowing where our tower was located, knowing what frequencies in Pittsburgh were already taken, he was able to come back and say, I think your best shot is 99.3.
Okay.
There's another one that doesn't look bad at 95.7. And he had about 4 or 5, but 99.3 was the most clear. It offered the biggest pattern. So we submit Chuck's plans to the FCC. The FCC says, that looks good. You're good to go. You have 3 years to put that thing on the air. So I said, well, good. Okay, now what? Again, you got to go find other smart people. Well, seriously, what do you got to do? Okay, I got approval. I got this.
The permission.
Where do it's not like you're going to go down to the store and buy. So
you might down in Beaver Falls. It's possible.
So
maybe
the next step in the process is you got to get the antenna built. And this is the most amazing segment of the whole thing.
Okay.
Is we used a company in Ebensburg, Pennsylvania.
All right.
Called Propagation Systems Incorporated, or PSI. And that's what they do.
It's a fancy name.
Yeah, they build antennas. So
okay.
We sent them over the drawings and graphs and specifications that Chuck had put together for us and was approved by the FCC. And it was not a perfect circle. It's a kind of a pattern that meanders from Elwood City at the top, down to about Moon Township, and then it kind of bends away from Pittsburgh for a little while, but it goes fairly far out into like East Palestine and Columbiana, Ohio.
Okay.
The reason why is we had to protect Wish. Wish is 99.7.
Okay.
We would share a common, and I don't know the exact term for this, I believe a secondary, or a common secondary step, 99.5.
Okay.
So the amazing thing is, Chuck designed the coverage pattern so it went around,
That's
kind
amazing.
of bowed out away from it, so we would stay enough distance away from that secondary frequency. And we took that to the antenna maker, and they look at the drawings and say, oh, okay, so you're going to need this, you need that, okay. They put the thing together.
All right.
And it was 3 different kind of diamond-shaped bays, if you will, squares, with little prongs sticking out here and there.
Okay.
And each one about 4 or 5 feet from one end to the other, all copper.
Interesting. And
then those things, worked in concert with each other, and that's what's mounted at the top of our tower, at a certain angle, and it's able to replicate what we were approved for.
That's fascinating to me. So when you're saying at the top of the tower is the antenna, and the antenna has projectiles that articulate in a certain way, which throw
Absolutely.
coverage to certain places and don't throw coverage to certain
Absolutely.
places.
That blows my mind that there's people smart enough in the world. It
just seems impossible.
Okay, yeah, we need to do this. We need to put another piece of metal here, and it needs to point exactly. They can make it happen. They can, and some of the patterns out there are very complex. They're almost like figure eights, where they're they're real big lobes on each end, and then it maybe compresses in the middle, and they can make that happen.
That's crazy.
Common sense you would think, if you have an antenna in the air and you're going to broadcast, it's just going to go everywhere.
Right.
And I think with an old-fashioned, like an AM antenna, a one-pole setup, that is what happens. But with these systems, it's pretty sophisticated. So they built the antenna, and then, of course, then what's next? Okay, well, someone's got to hang it up there.
I mean, you're not going to do that with your ladder?
And so there was another company from Hollidaysburg, Pennsylvania, named Multicom Inc. And we'd used this company to change the lights on the towers already, so I was familiar with them.
Okay.
And this is what they do. And they came down, and I think over the course of about 3 days, had them all installed. They had to spend a day going up there and building a rig first at the top of the tower, much like a skyscraper gets built.
Wow.
So they had a little arm, if you will, that came out from the side of the tower with a pulley and rope, and 3 or 4 guys up there on the tower. Keep in mind, they're 500 feet in the air.
500 feet.
500 feet in the air, and they're just clinging to, or they've climbed a tower that is 18 inches wide at that point in time.
Yeah.
It's 30 inches wide at the bottom, but it chokes down twice, and it's 18 inches wide in the section they're working on. They're all harnessed in and everything, but nonetheless,
it's 500 feet.
To climb 500 feet with 3 of these 4 or 5 foot bays, you're not going to do that. So they had to get up there and build a rig first. And with chains or ropes or whatever, then they pulled the bays up there and then mounted them in position. And next came the coax cable.
Okay.
Coax, that's one of those weird things where you think, wires, you don't really budget any cost for that.
500 feet of coax.
600. You think, well, even if you go down and buy like 10, 12 feet of it at Walmart for your TV, it's surprising how expensive it is. Well, this was 7/8 coax, which, it's not as big as this bottle of water here, but it maybe half the size.
Okay.
It might be like that.
Right.
And we needed 600 feet of it. Well, that was about $3,000. Not a ton of money, but when you're trying to ballpark and think of how much stuff is, the tendency is to not budget anything. Like those little wires and brackets, you just don't even think about them. That was a major expense.
600 feet of coax cable.
Yeah, and then the last part of it, once that was installed, and then that the beloved coax was run down the tower and then into the building.
Right.
There was yet another company involved from Claysburg, Pennsylvania, which I just discovered is way different than Claysville, Pennsylvania. There's a Claysville that's only about 100 miles away from here, down near Washington.
I'm familiar with that.
Matter of fact, I think it's close. It's probably only about 50 or 60 miles away from here. And I got the two, Claysville and Claysburg. I got them confused for a little while. I thought the guy was located like 50 or 60 miles away. Well, Claysburg is out near Altoona.
That's a little further.
Yeah. That's a 2.5 hour drive. So anyhow, there's a company out in Claysburg, Pennsylvania called Leitner Electronics.
Okay.
And Matt Leitner owns that company, and he owns several radio stations himself out in that neck of the woods. He's a radio guy.
Kind of like you.
He's like me, except he's smart. He knows how equipment works. He knows how to build things.
Radio guy.
He's a whiz kid. But he's also a transmitter dealer for a company called Nautel.
Okay.
And so we bought the transmitter from Matt, and he set it up in his shop to the frequency that we were supposed to broadcast on and all these things. And then he brought it down to our site on August 9th of this past year and installed it at in our building. And we fired up and ran it for about 10 minutes, and it was fantastic. And then Matt says, "Okay, let's turn it off now." And I say, "Well, no." He's well, yeah. The FCC needs to know that you're going on the air permanently now.
Okay.
You can leave it on if you want, but you're inviting trouble.
Yeah.
He said, "We have to turn it off now, guys. It's
pirate
like
radio, right?
It's like telling the little kids, you gotta put your toys away now. It's time to go to bed." We were all fired up. I texted all my friends, listen, tune in, and then I'm getting all these mean texts back. I keep tuning in. There's nothing there.
Yeah, it didn't work out right.
And because that was a Thursday evening.
Okay.
Well, that would have been August 8th. Saturday, August 10th, we had already had a vacation plan to go to Aruba.
Okay.
So that Friday in between, we did get all the paperwork submitted to the FCC. Matt had to take some readings of our tower, some impedance readings, because actually the original license for WBVP had to be reissued because the impedance of the tower was slightly different.
Okay.
No big deal. I guess that's what they do. With the hardware that was mounted on the tower, it was a little bit different.
Okay.
Didn't really change anything, but nonetheless, that had to be refiled. Matt had to sign off on some papers, but we got it all sent off to the FCC that Friday, and I hopped on a plane and went on vacation. And don't you know, Thursday that week we were down in Aruba, I get emails from the attorney in Washington, D.C. saying, "Hey, it's good to go. Let's rock and roll."
You're out of town.
Well, but nonetheless, I emailed the people back in Beaver Falls, where our office is, and they were already on it. And they sent our engineer up to the transmitter, and he turned it on. And I think at around 5 o'clock that evening on August 15th was when 99.3 came on the air for good.
Mm-hmm.
So I mentioned the engineer. Here's the significance with that, part of the puzzle. The guy that turned it on was a guy named Jim Roush.
Okay.
Jim Roush started working with us in 1960.
Wow.
You know how we are with the longevity for our employees
I am
at
aware.
WBVP and WMBA and now 99.3. Well, Jim starts with us in 1960.
Okay.
He just was out of engineering school. And one of the first things he did was in June of 1960, the company that owned WBVP at the time, which was, it would have been WBVP Inc., but the three owners would have been Frank Smith, Tom Price, and Charles Ondurka.
Okay.
They had gotten approved for a 16,500 watt FM radio station that at the time of when it was given to them was WBVP FM.
Okay.
Later on it became WWKS, KISS 106.7, and after a couple other morphings it became The Force
right
at 106.7, and then it was sold to the company that owns the X.
Got it.
They've switched frequencies since then, but initially the X was at 106.7, and that was the station that they turned on in June of 1960 at our at our transmitter, and Jim did that.
Life comes back full circle.
So
right?
he was the one that turned on the FM station that we had before. So Jim had a real illustrious engineering career in radio, and he's retired now, but he still helps us out. He's a part-time engineer.
Right.
So I had already decided that whenever we got the approval, Jim had earned the privilege of turning it on.
Throw the switch.
So from Aruba, I emailed her. But I emailed him. Turns out he had already, the people in Beaver Falls, my other office staff, Diane Powers, had already been in contact with Jim, and he was already headed to the transmitter to turn it on.
He wasn't going to miss that.
So the fun thing is with the modern technology like we have here with sharing videos over the internet.
Right.
I was able to get on my phone and do a selfie video with the folks back here in Beaver County.
That's very cool.
And congratulate them and tell them, well done. I'll catch up with you and we'll celebrate when we get back.
That had knowing you as I do, that had to kill you not to be there. But then again, you were in Aruba.
I did the best I could.
If you couldn't be there, there's worse places.
I wish I could be there, but you know what? Hang out.
I'm in Aruba.
I'm busy. So that's the FM, and as a matter of fact, you bring that up, and today's actually another kind of a big day.
Okay.
2 weeks ago or 2.5 weeks ago, our tower was struck by lightning.
Yeah, I found out late.
And it actually damaged both stations, WBVP and the FM 99.3.
Wow.
Matter of fact, it completely ruined the 99.3 transmitter. But within a couple days, we had a backup transmitter put in there, and we pulled the new transmitter that we had just bought out and shipped it off to get fixed. And it just got back today, and it was installed and turned back on by Jim Roush.
Same guy.
No one else is allowed to do it. And I'm going to say about 3 o'clock this afternoon it was back on. Okay. Now, it never... You can tell it's back up to full power now, and it sounds good. But so today is actually kind of a fun day, and
you're back to
our
full
transmitters. We're back to full strength. We're back up to...
Well, how often does that happen?
Not often. I've been in the business
So really, I would think a metal object protruding from the earth that high would be a conduit for lightning, right?
It gets lightning hits all the time.
Well, what's the difference between lightning hit and what happened?
What happened? I'm trying to think. It was that first Sunday evening in December, and I can't remember what day that is, but might have been December 1st. Yeah. It took a direct hit, like where the bolt hit the tower. And there have been a lot of other lightning strikes in the area where it'll come down and near it, or an offshoot of a bolt, and it doesn't do a lot. It might knock the stations off the air, but it's nothing more than going and turning the transmitters back on.
Okay.
There's equipment designed to discharge lightning bolts at the bottom of the tower.
Let's hope so.
And
almost like a ground, right?
There's a spark gap.
Okay.
And there are two pieces of copper that come close together, but they don't touch each other at the bottom of the tower.
Okay.
And with a normal lightning hit of nominal levels, it jumps the gap and goes harmlessly to the ground. When you get 1,000,000 volts coming down the tower, it goes everywhere. It doesn't matter if you have spark gaps or insulators. It's going to go where it wants to go. I was told this by the aforementioned Jim Roush.
1,000,000 volts?
Jim, well, what can we do in the future to... Let's put something
mitigate
in.
it.
Let's put it. Yeah, when we get this fixed, Jim, let's put something in there to stop this. He's looking at me like I'm speaking Spanish.
1,000,000 volts.
He's like, well, there's nothing you can do about it. I said, what do you mean? It happens all the time. And he was telling me how most of the time when they have a lightning strike, the tower's not really getting hit directly. It's something that it's happening in the area. It's close to the tower, or it's not a main lightning bolt or something. It's just a whole different variety of lightning strikes. I never knew this was the case. But what we had on Sunday the 1st was a direct hit.
Okay.
And when that happens, it's coming down in your building. There's nothing you can do about it.
So wait, help me understand. So you're saying it's about 30 inches wide at the base.
Yeah.
And it gets to be about, you said 18 inches wide at toward the top. How far under the ground is the base of that thing? I'm just curious because I'm fascinated by structures that are that high and what appear to be so thin, so feeble. Not that it's feeble, but it's just looking at it, like, how's that thing staying erect there?
Well, here's the fascinating thing. It doesn't go into the ground at all.
See, I don't get it.
I don't get it either. Even after all these years.
Is it bolted to cement?
No. It's held in place by a system of guy wires. So in other words, it's a triangular structure, and on each corner there are 8 guy wires that go out for a distance of 250 feet away from the tower. And with an equal amount of tension on each corner, and a wire about 125 feet, whatever it is that they're spaced, or 50 feet or 75 feet apart. Right. The guys that know a lot about physics and geometry, they can figure that out.
The engineers.
Yeah, the tower actually comes down to the base, 30 inches wide, and then right underneath that, it kind of narrows in to just a rubber collar so that it's not grounded at all. So it's basically almost not even attached to the ground. It's attached. There's a rubber collar, probably maybe 18 inches thick, tall. That the bottom of the rubber collar is bolted to cement and other things.
Yeah.
And the collar is attached to the tower.
But it's not really anchored there.
No, that would in no way support the tower.
It's kind of freestanding.
Or anything.
Yeah, it's kind of freestanding.
Yeah, so the tower, a live or hot RF tower, radio frequency tower, a tower that broadcasts an AM signal, cannot be grounded in order for it to work.
Okay.
So that's why you have towers like that. The whole structure is used to broadcast the AM signal.
Wow.
So if you go and touch one, you can get an RF burn.
Interesting.
You may or may not actually, not really not the same as being electrocuted, but you get an RF burn.
So the whole pole, the whole thing is basically the antenna.
Yeah, that's exactly correct.
So at FM, though, the antenna is at the top.
Yeah, there's just a little structure at the top. 2 completely different methods of broadcasting.
Interesting. Which are articulated in fashion as to send signals certain places and 2 miles away, not send a signal.
Yeah, they're both, they're actually completely different.
Okay.
Here is the difference. And it took me a while to figure it. I always knew what it meant, but I never really looked into it.
Okay.
AM stands for amplitude modulation.
Right.
FM stands for frequency modulation.
Okay.
So AM, or amplitude modulation, is the way it creates sound is the amplitude or the height of the wave changes when sound is induced into the carrier current or the transmitting current. So you can see, like, as it matches your words, it'll go up real high like this, and when there's pauses, there's nothing, and then it goes up and down and up and down, almost like one of those seismographs when an earthquake's happening.
Right.
So the amplitude goes high and low, depending on the sound, on the current. FM is the complete opposite. FM is the frequency of the waves changes, but they stay the same height. So when there are words or sound on an FM transmission, they'll all of a sudden get real tight together. They'll go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And then when it gets quiet, well, they're still going the same height.
Big space.
But they'll be like a long, lazy wave.
Got it.
So the advantage, they both have a lot of advantages.
Okay.
An AM broadcast will travel through mountains. It'll travel much greater distances with the same power.
Mm-hmm.
And it's undeterred by buildings and other things. Frequency modulation, or FM, is much better sounding, but it's pretty much line of sight.
Okay.
So that's why the need to have such tall towers if you're going to do FM.
To shoot it further, over mountains.
Even through buildings. If your tower is in the city or it's in a very urban area, you're going to have a significant struggle getting out of town.
Huh.
And that's why you can't hear FM radio stations in the tunnels. Well, I think they have antennas in there now.
Repeaters or whatever they call them.
They repeaters, but the audio quality's better.
It's like Steely Dan said, right? Mm-hmm. It's like Steely Dan said. No static at all.
No static at all. Doesn't. So with a station like ours, one of the reasons why it travels so far, even at a fairly low wattage, is because it's broadcasting on the tallest radio tower in Beaver County from a place that's already 1,100 feet above sea level. It's going to travel unobstructed for quite a while.
Got it.
Nothing's going to get in the way. Excuse me. So I know I get like that. People ask me what time it is. I'll tell them how to build a watch.
Well, no, it's fascinating because I think how many people just take for granted AM FM radio without really understanding the differences between the two, because I didn't know. I just knew one was clearer than the other, and I did assume that AM went further. I mean, there was the Heavy Goliath in this town. It was one of the original stations in the country broadcast to Chicago. Mm-hmm. You pick it up. Why do you think? Do you have any idea as to why, like at night, the signal tends to carry further? I mean, you could be in Chicago and hear.
Sure.
So why is that?
That's a phenomenon common with AM radio.
Yeah.
AM radio broadcasts.
Yeah.
What happens with amplitude modulation or AM radio is when the sun goes below the horizon, the atmosphere, the ceiling, comes much closer to Earth.
Okay.
The gravitational pull, I think, of the sun pulls the atmosphere down closer to land.
Okay.
And at night, it's actually close enough so that AM stations will bounce off of it, and they'll come down somewhere else. So at nighttime...
Is that random? Just random?
Yeah, I don't really know. But it does seem like if you can hear WLS out of Chicago, at nighttime tonight, you're going to be able to do it tomorrow.
Got it.
So I don't really know for sure, but I'm going to say I think so. It seems to be that way. So in the daytime, when the sun is up in the sky, the atmosphere is very high, so there's no reflection. There's no bounce down somewhere else. So you can't hear the faraway stations, but you can hear your local ones real good.
Right.
And the funny thing is, at nighttime, you can't hear your local stations very good.
I noticed that.
And it's because of that other interference. The other KDKs of the world and the other WBVPs of the world are 1230s and 1020s and 570s for WKBN are bouncing off the atmosphere and coming down here.
Got it.
Making it so that those fringe areas, they're muscling out the signal.
Got it.
I'm not aware that FM doesn't behave like that. It's in a higher bandwidth, and it doesn't seem to experience that same... Mm-hmm. People would call it skip. They would call it... But it's actually the signal bouncing off the atmosphere, and it is tied directly to where the sun is in the sky. I think when we were little, we used to always think, well, it's night. There's just not as much going on. You can hear it better. We kind of did. It's just we kind of made sense, but that's the science behind it.
So, let's do a little comfortable deep dive on you if we can. You're a Geneva grad, right? Which makes it all the synergy just work down there. But I really want to hear your story about how you got into this crazy radio business, because you are certainly suited for it. There's no question. The interest that you have in microphones, in radio broadcast, in old radios, in old radio shows, and the whole industry you have such a love for. I know you do. You're very instrumental in talking to me about mics and things, even for the studio, and I get it. But where'd all that come from? Was that something when you were a child? Were you interested in it when you were like 10?
Yeah. It's,
you grew up with it?
I might be a little bit like you, Eric. You've built this studio, and you have found a way to make a living and have fun and do what you want to do.
Yeah.
And make these shows and use it to help sell real estate and all these other things. When I was little, other people would listen to the radio and not think much of it.
Okay.
When I would listen to the radio, I would wonder, like, wow, that is really interesting. I wonder why they picked that song to play next. I wonder why they said it that way.
Okay.
I wonder where they get their weather. I wonder how they get the Pirate game to play over here.
Okay.
The other people in the world wouldn't give that a second thought. As well they shouldn't have. Turns out I was the weird one. And then somewhere when I was in high school, I became very, very smitten with the radio, and I would listen to it all the time, to the point where my parents would wonder, they would worry. He's been in his room for a week, just listening to the radio. What's he doing in there? And I was writing down all the songs they were playing.
Okay.
And I remember eventually I had wrote down all the songs that WBEN Buffalo at the time. This should have been late 70s. And it was known as Rock 102. And I wrote down all the songs and artists that they played for days on end, every song. And then I eventually discovered, I didn't know what I had discovered. Like Thomas Edison discovering that, oh, you know what, hey, when you took these two wires together, something happens. But not knowing why. So I discovered that, wow, look, when they play these songs over here, they'll work their way about halfway through the list, and then they start drawing from this list over here. And then they start grabbing some songs from down here in this other little group of songs. And I was I know what they're doing now. And I'd go to school the next day, and I would show this neatly typed list of all these, with a typewriter, mind you. You got an Underwood manual, typing away. Got this list of songs. I'm showing it to my buddies. And I said, look, I know what they do. They play these songs first, then they start playing these songs, and then they go over here and they play those songs. And
you broke the code.
And what I had figured out was their clock in the radio business. It's always referred to as a clock.
Okay.
The pattern of songs, the pattern of things that you're doing on an hourly basis.
Right.
I would learn that about 30 years later, but the actual term for it. So I showed my research to my buddies, and they look at me like, after pontificating, for 10 minutes about what this great thing I'd figured out, they looked at me and said, well, why would you want to know that? They said, well, who cares? I mean, we're going to go build our hot rod cars and try out for the football team and, and go meet girls, and you can go stick with your radio playlist there. And I thought, it isn't important to them. So I did wonder why they don't like it as much as I do.
All right.
And I would write letters to radio stations as a kid. One of my favorite ones, and I don't have a copy of it. I wished I did. I would give anything to see this letter again. When I was a senior in high school, I took the typing class.
Right.
We had to write a business letter to a business. The purpose wasn't to actually write them a letter or about any content, but it was to learn how to line it up. This margin should be over here. You get the salutation there. You started off with dear sirs and a colon, all those things. But you could pick whatever business you wanted to write to. So I decided to write a letter to WGRQ in Buffalo, was known as 97 Rock at that time. And I wrote this really nice letter, and I critiqued their playlist, and I suggested all these.
You critiqued their playlist.
Here are some songs that I would add if I were you. And I had like a nice little bulleted list here of songs, and then I had, these are some songs I think you need to drop from your playlist, and all these other things. And Yeah, I don't know that we ever actually sent them. I think the point was, just to
do it.
How do you write a business letter?
Okay.
I don't know what happened to it. I mean, I guess I turned it in. Maybe the teacher had it, but I would, if I could find that, I would think it'd be hilarious to read that now. I would write letters to Erie radio stations and ask them if I could have copies of their playlists. And I remember once or twice, they didn't send me their playlist, but they sent, like, at the end of the year, they'd publish a top 100 songs of the whole year, you know, and then they would have some sponsor on there, and I would get those,
Okay.
And I thought that was big stuff. So, I came down to go to school at Geneva. I grew up in Western New York, and I ran into some other guys when I arrived at campus. Initially, I thought maybe I'd go into electrical engineering.
Okay.
Well, lo and behold, I've gotten to fulfill that ambition, whether I like to or not either.
By force.
Fixing stuff that gets struck by lightning. But I got to school, and I saw these other guys that were majoring in radio broadcasting.
Okay.
And I looked at them and I said, "You can do that for a living? Where can I sign up at?"
Right.
So my parents, I mean, that must have killed them. Our electrical.
They didn't see that coming, though. I mean,
our electrical engineering son's going to go major in broadcasting now, and so I did. I started at the college radio station and started playing around there.
How do they work, Mark? Like a college radio station, is it just a transmitter on campus and it goes out roughly on campus?
Yeah, they back in the day, Geneva had, like many other schools, and some of them still do. Slippery Rock has a very well-developed program, and there are still schools that offer really sophisticated broadcasting curriculum, but it's kind of gone by the wayside. Kids want to major in other things now.
Okay.
But back then, there was probably 120 kids, all volunteers, all signing up for little 1-hour air shifts.
Just to hear their voice on the radio.
And I believe Geneva had a 15-watt or a 10 or a 15-watt signal.
Okay.
And it was at 88.3. Anything below 90.1 on the FM dial is public service or educational radio.
I did not know that.
Now, there are other nonprofit corporations that and run stations as part of their enterprise above 90.1.
Okay.
They can opt for that.
Okay.
There are, excuse me, there's a station like in Pittsburgh called K-Love. It's a Christian rock radio station at 98.3. Well, that's a regular for-profit license.
Got it.
But there's nothing saying that you can't choose to operate it as part of your nonprofit enterprise. But below 90.1, that's only for public service and education. That's usually where your college radio stations are, and that's where Geneva's was.
Okay.
So I did that for the college years and took all the speech classes and communication classes and all that sort of thing.
Were you a regular DJ on that station?
I was a DJ.
You were a DJ. What was your handle?
I think I might have. I don't know that I had one.
All the cool DJs have a handle, right? Wasn't that a thing? I don't know.
No, I don't really recall that I had a special like on-air name or anything. I was never very good at being on air. I can tell you that.
Really?
Not in college, and not at WBVP, and not anywhere.
But I hear you read some commercials once in a while. I during my show on Saturday, I hear the commercials. They're excellent.
This is 35 years later. I've had an opportunity to kind of work on it.
To hone your skills.
But I was bad. But that comes into play, shortly here.
Okay.
And I have, and maybe I'll send you a link or something. I have probably 5 or 6 of my college radio shows.
Oh, cool.
That I've converted over to MP3 files and edited down just when I talk, and they are horrible. Let me tell you. Well, the beauty of that's what college radio is for.
Sure.
They let us do what we wanted to do.
Sure.
No one came in and said, "Oh no, you can't do that. You've got to." You read the weather, and then you hit it with a promo, and then a liner, and you're out, and you hit it's 4 songs in a row. No, I mean if you wanted to talk after every song, you could.
So that really, but
it was
it's almost like public radio then.
Right. It was a time to learn the craft.
Got it.
Have fun with it.
Got it.
And that's the best thing that it's for.
Okay.
There was real radio. Everything is formatted. And when you go to work there, you become part of what they're doing.
Correct.
So the days of playing your own music and screwing around with your roommate and
the days are gone.
They're gone. That's what college radio's for. Although it exists a little bit at our place, we probably have more fun than most places, and I choose to run it that way.
From my viewpoint, my limited viewpoint, it's a lot of fun happening there.
Yeah, I mean they have probably a little more liberty at our stations, and sometimes it rears its ugly head on the air. But I realize, but what we don't. Well, we're a small market, small stations, and we can't pay big money. We do the best we can, but what we can offer that the announcers are never going to get at the big city stations is the ability to do their own radio shows.
Right.
And for the most part, they do their own talk shows, they have their own topics, do their own thing, and have a little fun.
Right.
There's not a strict format and clock that they have to follow.
There is not, I can tell you. And it's a lot of fun, I can tell you that too.
Yes. But, while I was in school, I knew there was a radio station in Beaver Falls. I couldn't have even told you the frequency, the dial position.
Okay.
I knew there was one right on the main drag there. I'd driven by it or something.
Okay.
So I literally wandered down there one day and asked if I could hang out there or work there or be an intern or something, and they got tired of me hanging out there, so they allowed me to be an intern.
Here's a room.
He said, okay. I mean, that was like a hard decision for them to make. They were like, oh, okay, come on, leave us alone. You can be an intern. And then eventually they promoted me and I was allowed to drive the van.
Oh, okay.
And then I blew up balloons. I'm not kidding.
I believe you.
So I'm blowing up the balloons and driving the van. I'm getting paid like $3.25 an hour. That's minimum wage. I thought it was the greatest thing in the world.
I know the area you're talking about.
And then the next thing that happens that was real crucial was there was a gentleman named Ed Hermick. Ed still works for me. Mm-hmm. And Ed was the overnight disc jockey, the overnight announcer on WBVP in 1986. Ed was lucky enough to get a job full-time at Valvoline in Freedom. So he waltzes into the office one day and says, I'm going to have to resign. I've got a job at the Valvoline plant, and it's been great or whatever. And I don't know exactly how or why it happened, but somehow or another they said, okay, well, see you later, bye-bye. and they just parted ways. I still don't really know exactly what all transpired there.
Okay.
But nonetheless, the general manager was Chris Shovlin.
Chris Shovlin?
Chris Shovlin says...
Okay.
Yeah, the same Chris that Lincoln Park now and was at Wish and WJS all those years.
Right.
He was the general manager at the station.
Okay.
Well, now he had nobody to come up, and we were all live 24/7. This is before automation. The overnight guy was gone. And
now you have a hole.
And he says, well, now what am I going to do? It's 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and someone's got to do the overnight shift. And the owner was a guy named Ted Rossetti, who I'm still friends with, and he lives in Swickley, and he helps me out a lot when my transmitters blow up. He's an engineering whiz guy. Ted says, well, who's that guy right down there?
Who's that guy?
He didn't even know who I was. Maybe he can be on the air. I got to go. I got bigger things to do. He hits the road. Chris says, hey, come up here and see me. He goes, how would you like to be on the air? I said, sure, that's great. I'll do it. And when does my shift start? He goes, tonight at midnight. And there's a key lesson here for all kids, and I tell this story whenever I speak at colleges or whatever. On the rare occasion when somebody doesn't really know who I am and they think I'm cool and they invite me. But a couple times I've spoken in college classes and communications groups, and I say, the lesson to learn here is, in that early stage of your career, whatever they say, you just say, I'm in, let's do it.
Do anything.
You don't ask what you're getting paid. You don't ask when your first sick days are. You don't ask when your health insurance kicks in. You just go do it.
Indeed.
And I did. It wasn't an act. That was that was the way I thought. Okay, midnight, I'm in, let's do it. And so I was on from midnight till 6 o'clock. And of course, like all radio station management, and I've become one of them, and once the problem is solved, you forget about it. So I was on the air every day, midnight till 6, for like the next 3 months.
That's a 6-hour shift as opposed to some of the daytime folks are probably about 4 hours generally, right? 3 to 4 hours.
And,
wow.
Weekends and Sundays. It wasn't hard, but the consequence was graduation rolled around, and I barely graduated from college because that second semester of my senior year, I was just doing the radio show and kind of going to class a little bit.
A little bit.
And maybe taking a final once in a while. So I coasted through and graduated, but I wasn't even close to being to the point of looking for a job.
Okay.
So I thought, well, I'm just going to hang out here, and I'll keep working my little job down there at WBVP, and then maybe later on, now that my schedule frees up, I'll start looking for another job, a good big job, a real job.
Real job.
Well, as you can tell, I'm still here. I'm available. There was a couple, 2 or 3 key things there it's fun to think back on it. Number one, I got to school and I met other guys that were doing it, and up until that point, I didn't realize that you could do that for a living. Number two, I got down to WBVP and happened to be there when somebody quit and was willing to go work their air shift no matter what time of day it was. And I enjoyed it. It was not a hardship. And but the third key thing was, and I mentioned about being terrible on the air earlier, that was a blessing. Because eventually Chris stayed up past midnight one night, Chris Shovlin. And he hears, this awful representation of his of the company he managed. And, so after that, they say, oh, gee whiz, we got to do something about this. He's a good guy, but, man, we can't have that. Even if it's midnight, we got to... So they sort of suggest to me, hey, why don't you try sales? And I think, wow, it must be they think I'm going to be good at sales.
That's a promotion.
They think, oh, yeah. So same thing again. Oh, yeah, sure, I'll do that. When does it start? How does it work? Well, you think you ask those, how does it work, in an interview or in a... You would tip somebody off like, ooh, this person doesn't have any idea what this is about.
Yeah.
I knew there were commercials on the radio station. I didn't know where they came from. I didn't know there were people out there trying to ask, soliciting that. But I signed up for it. Oh, yeah, I'll do that. He says, well, you get paid commission. I said, great. What is it? Not what percentage is it? What does the word mean?
What's commission mean? That's great.
So I enter into the sales job with that mindset. But it's like all things, it ended up being that was where my personality, my temperament was much more suited for the sales end of things than the on-air. Well, I didn't really have any talent at all there. And because I was so terrible on the air and switched over to sales, that allowed me to make a career out of it, though.
Okay.
If I would have been better on the air, what would probably have happened was I'd have just kept plugging away, and eventually, because there wouldn't have been a lot of money to make it,
right,
being an announcer in Beaver Falls,
right,
I'd have probably left the business or gone on and done something else, or maybe gone to another radio station.
Got it.
Because I got into sales, I never made big money, but enough that I could hang out and it was okay, and I kind of liked it. I was in the business that I wanted to be in, and I was enjoying a little bit of success, and I really did. I like doing it. To this day, when someone says, okay, I'll do your deal, I have to control myself. Wait till I'm out of their presence, to let the sheer delight and excitement go. That's still the thrill of a lifetime.
The success of it.
But, so I always had that. But that allowed me to stick it out, if you will, and stay here.
Okay.
And, I continued to plug away and learn more and learn more. Mm-hmm. And 28 years later, after walking into the building as a Geneva College intern, I bought the place. And if I hadn't have sucked on the air, if I wasn't bad on the air, I guess I should say.
Saying you what? No FCC here, pal.
Well, if if my parents are watching. Hi, Mom.
I hope.
But that was how I ended up. That was how I ended up where I'm at now. And when I met my wife in Beaver Falls, and she graduated from New Brighton, we live in the area, and it's given us a wonderful opportunity. And I think that this was the role I was meant to play. I was brought to the area to go to school there, and by going school there, that I ended up at the radio station, because in time I was, I think God had it in mind for me too. These were the events that were going to unfold, and this is where He needed me to serve, and it's been a real wonderful thing.
Talk to me about WBVP. It's the voice. This is my opinion. It's the voice of Beaver County. I'm sure you agree with that. But in your entity, your WBVP and WMBA,
yes,
and 99.3 comprise Beaver County Radio. Did you come up with that entity name, Beaver County Radio, or was that already in place when you bought?
I had that name in mind for quite a while.
Okay.
It became very shortly after the gentleman that I previously worked for was a very good guy named Frank Ioriel. He owned our stations for 19 years.
Right.
And during Frank's ownership, he bought WMBA.
Okay.
Off of Donnie Wysick, and that happened in June of 2000. And once he had WBVP and WMBA, and it was two stations operating the same, it was fantastic. But one of the things I noticed was, man, it was hard to tell people who you were.
Got it.
When you think about, especially like an email, our old website used to be WBVP-WMBA.com. Well, in reality, it's only, about 14 or 15 characters. But it's almost as if it's like 14 or 15 different words.
Right.
If you're trying to, that don't go together, if you're trying to explain it to somebody over the phone.
And then you have that nasty hyphen in there too.
Yeah. So I had sort of thought that it might make sense, even at that stage, somewhere along the line in that stage of the game, to come up with a nickname, if you will, a branding slogan that was identified the stations with the county, simple, easy, and that would be real easier to manage.
Okay.
And now with 99.3, I mean,
yeah, try to put those three together.
Now it's becoming a sentence. Well, a lot of our car dealers are like that, and there's one called Beaver County Auto.
Yes.
And a good friend of mine owns that company, PJ Latsko. Well, if he named it after all the franchises that he has, it would go on for a sentence.
Right.
It's easier to create a common name and brand the company as that, with a subtitle, if you will, of all the various lines, if you will. And for us, it's sets of call letters.
For a child, and we're roughly the same age, but for a child like myself growing up in the airport corridor and, going to Cornell High School here and just remembering WBVP as the station who carried our sports, high school sports were what we knew WBVP as growing up. And that really hasn't changed, because the sports broadcasting is grown and grown with the station. And I mean, it's amazing too, just hearing the amount of calls that come in on the sports shows, that in a town that's dominated by Steelers, Pirates, and Penguins, how many calls come in from listeners about local high school sports. That was a very eye-opener for me when I came to the station with you 3 years ago.
You're absolutely correct, and that is a very prominent thing with us. The Steelers that you just mentioned, one of the big things they like to promote about the Steelers, well, even people that aren't with the Steelers, I think in the game this past Sunday evening, the announcers were talking about, well, for the past 50 years, they've only had 3 coaches, Chuck Noll and Bill Cowher and now Mike Tomlin. That's consistency. That's why they do good. And it's true. Well, here's a funny thing. You mentioned the high school sports. Well, since 1948, when WBVP went on the air, we're only on our 4th play-by-play anchor for high school sports.
Really?
Yeah, Chuck Wilson was the first one.
Wow.
And then after Chuck, there was a guy named Jay Knaffel.
Okay.
But Chuck did it for quite a while. He was the sports guy from 1948 until 1975, I believe. And in the mid-'70s, the late 70s, there was a guy named Jay Knaffel, who actually was at WMBA before he was at WBVP. And then for a little while, Jay Knaffel and Chris Shovlin, who we've already mentioned, overlapped, and they did games together.
Okay.
And then Chris called sports on WBVP and was the main voice until 1992. Bob Barrickman started with our company in 1987, or 86 or 87.
Okay.
And so for a little while he was there with Chris, and then when Chris moved on to other jobs, Bob took over the lead role as the lead play-by-play guy and the sports director. So we're only on our fourth main play-by-play guy.
Wow.
In 71 years.
It's incredible.
That, I'm going to submit to you, is brand value that's almost priceless. You could have other people call the games.
Mm-hmm.
They might even sound as good, technically speaking, but when you have that familiarity with the sound, the feel, it's equity that you can't even put a price on it with the listener.
And familiarity is such an important thing with radio. I mean, in our early discussions years ago, talking about how to brand a show, how to create a show, and you talked a lot about familiarity, and that comes through consistency. It all kind of plays together.
You know, there's a competing station of ours that carries high school football, and their broadcasts actually sound very, very good. Mm-hmm. And but I couldn't even tell you who their play-by-play and color guys are.
Right.
And I'll hear the promos, and they'll say, "Hey, join Jim Bob Smith," or whoever. And they actually do a great job. But I can't even visualize or even think of what the guys are going to sound like. There's no brand identity there.
Right.
Now, one of the other... So that's why it's worked for us, is consistency. But there's another factor that makes high school sports such a big thing for us.
Okay.
And that's the community pride and old-time tradition that you find around here in Beaver County, and in the Pittsburgh area in general. Mm-hmm. You have an area where people still take a lot of interest in their local high school teams. Mm-hmm. And it isn't that way everywhere.
It is not.
If you go other areas outside of this area, I think high school football is always kind of an interesting thing. But they play before stands that are empty.
Right.
A radio station would never consider covering their games.
Right.
And even that touchdown catch that was in the fog that you see on the national network, if you look at the stands, there's nobody in them.
I noticed that. I did notice that.
I think it was a New Hampshire
I think it's New Hampshire
championship or something. It looked like a wonderful game, and I don't mean to take anything away from those kids.
Absolutely right.
I think in areas of Florida and Texas, you'll find the same thing again. I've heard so. It's that way. But when our communities developed in western Pennsylvania, they were very close-knit ethnic communities. Mm-hmm. And by ethnic, I mean they were a lot of people with common interests and likes and lifestyles that came here from other areas overseas in Europe to work in the steel mills and other areas, and they all settled together. Mm-hmm. So they all worshiped together on Sunday. They all joined the same Elks clubs or SOI clubs and all these other things, and their kids all played on the football team together. And they were known as the Tigers or the Raiders or, whatever. The Quips or the Bridgers, or I better mention them all here. I'm going to get in trouble.
Don't forget
the Lions, and and the adults wear the sweatshirts.
Absolutely.
I live in New Brighton in my New Brighton Lions shirt.
Right.
There's
pride. There's pride.
So that's one of the reasons why the high school football especially has been such a great thing for us. Is the guys that we just talked about did a real good job broadcasting it, and it didn't hurt that we started the careers of Tony Dorsett and
didn't hurt at all.
Joe Namath and Mike Ditka and Ty Law and Darrell Revis and
on.
Jordan Whitehead and all these other people. Well, I guess we didn't really start their careers. We were the first places that people heard about them on the air.
Correct.
So we had a real good bed of talent going on too. But the interest from the community, the way the community's formed, and the interest, the natural interest they had in the games themselves, made it so that people went nuts. They would, if they couldn't hear the game on Friday night or hear the radio show, they'd drive their car to a different spot. They'd call off work. There's countless stories of people that would fake sickness and stuff and risk losing their jobs at the mill so they could go to the game on Friday night. Who would do that? And
I get it.
So
I get it.
Our stations ended up being in the exact perfect place for us, for the size of our stations and for who we broadcast to and what we do. We couldn't be in a better spot, and that's in Beaver County and in a little bit of Allegheny County and maybe a little
Don't
bit.
Don't forget about us.
Well, we carried We carried a couple of Cornell games this year. We carried last year when Quaker Valley won the state championship. We carried their games.
Yep. Yes, indeed.
But I refer to Quaker Valley, Moon Township, Cornell, mainly those three communities. They're Beaver County light.
Yeah, I think so.
And
I think so.
The fact is, WMBA's towers, where its broadcast towers are located, they're actually in a community called Bell Acres. Station is licensed to Ambridge, but the towers are in Bell Acres. That's actually in Allegheny County.
It is. Shh.
It's actually in Quaker Valley School District. The towers are closer to Swickley than they are to Ambridge.
Right.
So it's all good. Those community, but you're going to find in those communities the same level of community pride, of dedication or whatever, what have you, that you do. They're like Beaver County communities.
You have is there Coach's Corner where you have you have your play-by-play folks, all your sports director, the people in the station involved in the broadcasting of the sports. They meet during football season, I think once a week at a tavern, and there's guests. Yeah. I mean, it's a and you broadcast from there, right?
That's true. Coach's Corner is one of our newer shows. That's only been on since 1988. and in 1988, you're correct. We do a weekly show on Wednesday evenings.
Yeah.
And I think it's always been from 7 to 8. I don't think the times even varied. And the first year or two was at a restaurant in Rochester called Didio's. And there was a year or two it was at a bar in Beaver Falls called the Best Cellar. And then after that, it moved over to Robert's Roadside Inn in Bridgewater, and it's been there ever since. I think it's been at Robert's Roadside Inn like 29 years or something like that.
Wow.
Now think about that. We talked about the dedication to the communities. We actually have a sponsor, that being Bob Skurlick at Robert's Roadside Inn, that has bought advertising and sponsored these shows for going on and having a broadcast at his place every week for like 30 years.
Right.
That's unheard of.
It's unheard of. That's really being entrenched in the community too, and that's where, and that's it. We've talked off camera a lot too, and I want to touch on that. Going back to our first conversation years ago, Mark, you really never wavered in your belief of radio and the importance of radio as technology continued to develop and other methods of, whether it was web-based things or the deterioration of television popularity and so forth. You never wavered in your belief of radio on multiple fronts. You talked about service, the community. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like why you believe in radio so strongly, even today in 2019?
Well, radio just happens to be the media that I'm involved with. What I believe in is content. In other words, anything can work. You and I could run a newspaper. There's nothing wrong with that. The perception is
that's interesting.
The perception is that newspaper is old and radio is old, and those how could we don't need them anymore. That's nonsense. What is true though is because they have cut back on expenses and they don't do things as much as they used to, and they don't write as many columns, and they don't research, they don't cover the town meetings. There's not as much content in the paper.
Okay.
And at a time when there are way many more options for the listener to go find their information, they're actually cutting back what they're doing. See, it's
not smart business.
Yeah, I'll submit to you that if you're providing unique, compelling content, and in our case, it's local talk shows with people like you and the high school sports that we talked about and Coach's Corner and all these other things, we can't find them anywhere else. It doesn't mean that everyone's going to like it, but it's not duplicated either. So if you like that stuff, and I always joke about Yankee Trader, because to me, it's just a funny old-fashioned radio show.
Right.
I don't know that everybody likes it or listens to it, but it's been on the air for about, it seems like a couple hundred years. Listen to it today, and there's a guy that has a bumper for a Ford, a 1964 Ford pickup truck, and he's still calling every day to try and sell that thing. And someone's got to call that guy and buy it. But nonetheless, if you like that, so what I'm getting at is the show is a little cheesy. There are radio professionals out there, consultants, those highly paid people that have big ideas that would say, oh no, we need to get rid of that. That's not what the trendy people like. That's not, no. Well, they might actually be right, but here's the other side of the coin. If you like that type of programming, if you like the Yankee Trader thing, if you like high school football, if you like the local talk shows that we do, we own you. There might only be 5 of you, but we own you.
Got it.
There might be 100 of you. There might be 1,000. Our audience, I'm sure, is not as big as some of the great big huge mega companies, but we own it. And advertisers, business people, entrepreneurs are always looking for ways to do what? Increase their business.
Absolutely.
Develop business. And you can develop business when you can talk to a group of captivated people.
Absolutely right.
If you don't have influence over anybody, an advertiser isn't going to have any interest in it. So when I'm back to my earlier statement, it doesn't matter if it's a newspaper or a television station or anything. If you're offering unique programming, local programming that can identify with somebody's market community, it's not going to be appealing to every last person, but whoever likes it, they can't find it anywhere else. And there will always be business people and advertisers looking to reach somebody. And you'll at least have a product to give them. I think we're seeing a little bit of people in the social media arenas are beginning to discover that. We've gone through that period of and we use it a lot at the station, so I'm going by some of my own little observations. Initially, you could throw something out on Facebook, and people were just waiting on Facebook. They would have the browser open on their phone, and they're waiting for somebody new to post something. Oh wow, look, there it is. They'd like it and comment. It's just it's boiled. It's gotten to the point now where it's normal and pedestrian. It's just another media, along with the other social medias. They're all fantastic. They're all great. But you're only going to command users and following if you publish unique, compelling, and in their case, true.
That's a problem for
content. Authentic. Again, advertisers will always be willing to pay for placement in front of people that are, wherever there's a solid audience like that, and if they perceive that you have influence and importance over people. So I think the future for radio is bright. One of the unique things about radio is it reaches 97% of the population of our nation. There's nothing else that does that. It doesn't mean that they all listen all the time every day, and it doesn't mean that they all listen to my station. There are 14,000 radio stations in the United States.
Wow.
And, at one point in time, 97% of the population, from infants to kids to people in nursing homes, rich people, poor people, are reached with radio in their cars, in their homes, or wherever it is they go. The other media platforms can't come close to that. They do real well in smaller segmented demographics.
Right.
But as far as a mass media reach, it's unparalleled. And that ability that we have to get into all the homes everywhere in a community just isn't duplicated by anybody anymore. With the fact that the newspapers seem to be kind of fading away. You know, at one point in time, that they had the same benefit.
Do you think newspapers are dying under their own management? I mean,
of course,
it isn't the other competitors driving them out. It's their own mismanagement of their own industry.
The perception that they are no longer valid. They've helped
They bought into it.
They've helped perpetuate what was told to them.
That's interesting.
You know, I don't know anybody that wouldn't go pick up a newspaper and read it if it had, you know, an exciting story about the state championship game that Cornell High School or whatever just won yesterday. You know what I mean? They would, and if it had great pictures.
So is journalism on a decline?
No, it's different.
Okay.
The thing that will always be true, and this is why the future's bright for radio, it's bright for newspaper, it's bright for everybody in the media that does it right. The insatiable hunger for information will always be there. When people wake up in the morning, when they, you know, really when they go throughout their day, they want to know, how did my team do last night? What's the weather going to be? How bad is the traffic? How long is it going to take me to get to work?
Right.
You know, did the stock market go up? Did my local school district go on strike? Did the school board get a new did they elect a new member? It's been that way since the beginning of time, and that, my friend, will not change. So all we have to do as the people that operate the media is satisfy that need. The only thing that's changed is there are other options. There are other ways that the people can get their information. And that's great, because what it has done is it's made people like us, the radio people, make our product better. It used to be if we were being on the air was good enough.
Right.
You could just play records and burp on the air and make sound effects and, you know, tell dirty jokes. It was all good because people were just fascinated enough to, let's listen to the radio. Look, this is a new thing. Look, you can hear voices coming out of that box, you know, but it's not that way anymore.
Okay.
It's another platform that delivers information. So you have to be good. You have to be better than the other options. And we have an advantage. Ours is free. Ours is everywhere.
Yours is very locally entrenched as well, too. Because I believe in a statement, Mark, that all politics is local. And in theory, it goes more to the human condition that we can be fed all the international, national, regional news and information all the time, but it does always come back to what's going on around us. It starts kind of there. And I think that's where we really want to feel good about life. We want to find the information. I think it all starts at home. I think it does. I think it's the community. I think it's just the people around us, the people we interface with. And I think that's why in major cities, local television news at 11 and 7 was always a big thing. And people did watch the nightly news, I guess, CBS, NBC, all that stuff. I think that's why local news was always just so darn important. I think everything starts at home. And I think when we forget to do that in society, we forget about that. And I was pleasantly reminded of that when I started doing my show on your station, because I was amazed. And I was amazed people were calling my show. Once we opened it up to variety, they were calling and asking about sports. They were asking about, like, hey, what was the score of that Beaver Falls Beaver game last night? And I'm like, wow, this is like these people are really dialed in. They want to know.
Well, one of the funnier things that just happened like last week 2 weeks ago on your radio show, I'd stop by, and if you recall, somebody called in live on the air asking when they could watch on television the upcoming football.
They did.
And our announcers are busily searching the internet trying to figure so they can answer this guy's question on the air.
Matt's over there banging keys.
Meanwhile, we're carrying the game on the radio, and I'm thinking to myself, come on, why should we give out?
And
that?
We told them that.
But to your point, though, that's how important a role that our radio station plays within the lives of these people is that they feel comfortable enough that they can call, not the office line, mind you, the on-air line.
Right on air, yep.
And ask us questions like, what television stations can I watch the game on? And we'll answer them.
I know.
That's the type of relationship we have with our community, and that's why we still exist.
Do you think also, from a political standpoint in Beaver County, from the county level down to the smaller races, the smaller towns in Beaver, you folks are providing the information, the news, the forum for these candidates to maybe come on and talk or debate or discuss? That's intrinsically valuable to me.
Yeah,
wouldn't you agree?
That's valuable actually on a couple different levels. It's valuable from the natural thing. We have the candidates on. Mm-hmm. There's an announcer we have named Frank Sparks, and he does a real good job this past general election. He interviewed all the row officers that were up for election in Beaver County.
Right.
And I think he did about probably like 25 different interviews.
Wow.
Quite a few. I mean, there are, I think, 7 different row officers. There are, in the office of commissioner, there were 4 different people running. And there were a couple of judges that were up for election as well. So there was a lot of people coming in and out that he interviewed and let people, have a brief look-see at what this candidate was like. Mm-hmm. So that brings a little bit of tune, and that's an obvious advantage. Sometimes advertisers will like to be a part of that, so there's an advantage there for us.
Sure.
But one of the things that I like about it, and that's that greater good thing.
Yeah.
It lets us help participate in the democracy process by showcasing these candidates and hopefully letting people get to know them better and help them make voting decisions. Mm-hmm. And I know I'm waxing philosophical here and maybe thinking bigger than what it really is, but that is part of the process. One of the other things we do that's kind of part of that is we still send reporters to the municipal meetings and the school board meetings. Mm-hmm. And there's a very lovely lady that works for us named Sandy Giordano. Mm-hmm. And Sandy, the Super Bowl for Sandy is if Aliquippa is having a school board meeting and they're thinking about hiring a new school janitor. I mean, it's game. It's go time.
Game on.
Game on. You know what I'm saying? But she goes to every meeting.
Right.
And she sits there in a chair and she takes notes.
Right.
Whether there's big business or not.
Yeah.
They might have hired a new crossing guard, and that's all that happened at that meeting or something. Mm-hmm. But I remember one time there was a school administrator that saw me at an event, and he said, "Hey, Mark, enough's enough. Can you send her somewhere else for a few months? It's old having her always at the meetings." I said, "Why is that a problem?" "Well, she asks questions, and then, we get sidetracked and whatever." And I thought, oh, okay, I got you. So it never really occurred to me. But if you have that media representative, and it doesn't have to be from our company, could be from the newspaper, could be from anywhere. But everyone else had gotten out of the habit of doing that until recently. We got back into it. If you have a representative from the media at these public meetings, mm-hmm. there's a small level of accountability, even if the media person never participates. The fact that there's an outside portal, if you will, where information can go to the masses, they're going to conduct their meeting above board. Mm-hmm. They're going to follow the rules. Mm-hmm. They're going to, things are probably going to happen in a more orderly fashion. Not that they're intentionally done otherwise without the rep there, but that's part of the role we play as a media company.
Kind of keeping them honest.
Well, and helping society function.
Mm-hmm. I get that.
And most of the reasons that you operate as a media company are more for a way to make money, a way to build a company and maybe sell it and retire someday, or amass wealth. Hopefully, it's something that's fun, and the media business is fun. Everyone that's part of the company is almost like a little celebrity.
It is fun.
But then there's that. We actually play a small role in helping our community, our area, function as an orderly society.
Mm-hmm. Well, my comparison would be why I think it was an eye opener to me was you have Allegheny County and you have the major television networks there covering the Allegheny County, let's say the commissioner's race, whatever that is, commissioner's race. You don't have the same level of television coverage in the Beaver County commissioners just because of proximity, population, location. So where I think your station makes headway is that you are the interface to these candidates running their platforms. You're providing the biggest source of information probably to Beaver Countyans in the news, in the media, because they're not getting that from the major stations in Allegheny County. You see what I mean? I think it's right. That was an eye opener for me. Like, wow, like I know this about my Allegheny County commissioners because there's so many people covering them, so many outlets covering them. In Beaver County, if you don't really dial into WBVP and get it skinny, it's hard to make an informed decision because you really have to seek it out. Does that make any sense?
The major metro stations, radio and television, are going to be their news and influence is going to be centered around Pittsburgh politics, Allegheny County politics.
Right.
It has to be. Pittsburgh is a metro area of 5 counties, that Allegheny County being the biggest.
Right.
But it also includes Westmoreland County, Washington County, Butler County, and Beaver County. And actually, all 4 of those surrounding counties are markets unto themselves.
Yes.
And they have their own media. In each of those counties, there are stations just like ours that do very, very well. They cater to their own little community.
Right.
And they promote the things that are going on in their neighborhood, which most of the time are not covered by the metro media.
Right.
There are 37 or 38 radio stations, I believe, that show up and are listed as serving in the Nielsen ratings for the Pittsburgh metropolitan area. Okay. Now, that would include stations in Ohio and other places. They're not necessarily located here, but their coverage area reaches into the area. And thus there are people that show up as listening to them. So you have that many stations serving an area of, roughly, 1.5 million people maybe for all 5 counties, maybe a little bit higher than, maybe 2 million.
Okay.
There's 1.3 million or 1.2 million in Allegheny County, I believe, and Westmoreland would have 300,000 or 400,000. Beaver and Washington counties are about the same size of 160 or 170,000. Butler's a little smaller, maybe 2 million. I don't know.
Okay.
So you have that many stations coming in and serving an area of roughly 2 million people. In order to make any headway, you're going to have to dominate a certain area. There's no way that you're going to be able to cover all 5 counties. And
Understood.
There's too many others like that have the ability to do something too. So you have to figure out, like any business, you can't be all things to all people.
What's your niche?
What's the one thing that I do better, or at least different?
Okay.
And then just zero in on that. And for us, it's covering the local Beaver County stuff. The 165,000 some odd people that live in Beaver County. That's and a little bit here into the northwestern part of Allegheny County. That's where you can hear the signal, and that's where we that's where we do our best. That's who we serve.
And you broadcast all 3 major sports teams in this town. You broadcast the Pirates, the Penguins, and the Steelers. Is that correct?
Traditionally, we have. We did make a decision last year We dropped the Steelers.
Okay.
We still carry the Pirates and the Penguins, and but for a long time we carried all three.
Yeah. Which is great too, because as a realtor, I travel a lot in Beaver County, and as you get away, sometimes I have to work Sundays. But when you travel, you lose, your traditional, where I am from here in Western Allegheny County. We always knew these two stations had one had the Pirates, one had the Penguins, and that's where we'd go. But those stations don't reach deep into Beaver County, and I didn't know until I worked with you folks that you also carried those. That's a huge benefit, I think.
Oh, one of the right there's benefit from having the people that will tune into the product. The Pirates and Penguins are really good for radio tune-in.
Mm-hmm.
The Pirates can have an 0-162. They can have a season where they don't win a game, and it's still going to be a great radio product.
Do that.
Baseball and radio is just fantastic.
It's made for radio. No question.
You can put the game on and you're driving down the road, and it's there's a lot of time for storytelling with the announcers.
Yep.
You have a natural time where you have an inning, and then there's a break between the inning, and you play a couple commercials, and then it's back again. You don't miss any of the action. It's a fairly slow pace. You don't need to hang right by the radio and maybe miss something like the other sports are. And the Pirates in Major League Baseball don't have quite the same media saturation as, say, the NFL does.
Mm-hmm.
I think the games are all on television somewhere, but it's not as major of a thing. So the radio coverage is a little more prominent. Same thing with the NHL and the Penguins.
Okay.
Penguins are very, very popular. Matter of fact, I saw somewhere, I think in a news story, that they were their fan base is the number one fan base in
Forbes, in the
NHL. So they're
an
immensely popular team. And again, much like Major League Baseball, the NHL does not have a lot of major network consistent television coverage.
True.
I mean, you get
very true.
Especially when they're in the playoffs. You think, are they on ESPN tonight? Are they on the
Fox Sports 7
or whatever? Are they on NBC? It's not. I mean, it's good, but they don't have that.
Yeah.
The NFL is just light years ahead. The NFL got to the point, and one of the reasons why we made a financial decision to go in a different direction. The only person who's going to listen to the Steelers on the radio is someone who can't be in front of the TV.
That's exactly right.
And there are a lot of them out there, but it's ubiquitous. It's available everywhere, and there's not a lot of reason for. It's not going to make any difference if we carry the game and if we don't. And my thought was proven. I don't think we fielded any phone calls.
Interesting.
Not carrying the Steelers.
Well, to me, baseball is a beautiful game, period, but it's beautifully played on radio.
Oh, sure.
And I like to watch a Pirate game. I like to watch a baseball game live, of course, or TV. That's a different dynamic. But again, the point is you can turn your head from the television and you're still engulfed with the audio portion. It works just as well on radio as it does on television, to me. Sometimes a little better.
Oh, I actually think it does. And one of the things that's great about baseball is, since most of the time when you're hearing a baseball game, it's summertime, all of the memories that you have with listening to baseball games, even watching them in person or whatever, they're usually surrounded by it being a nice summer day. And
you're out experiencing life too. Oftentimes, you're doing other things while you're listening to the game, and I think that's part of Americana. I do. I think football is a game that you watch because there's 22 people, moving at one time. It's a different animal completely. And with baseball, you actually engulf yourself in because it's a slow, methodical, and then it builds to a crescendo, and it's a beautiful event. And I think we have two good announcers. You have announcers who understand that they're speaking to a radio audience that's not watching it as well. And they understand that. It can be magnificent.
Oh, yeah. Baseball is, and I guess you're right, and that's why we continue to carry the Penguins and the Pirates. And maybe we'll pick up the Steelers again. Who knows? We'll I've gotten excited about the team again this year with their, their cast of characters, and it seems like they have players that are playing real hard, and we don't. Sometimes you don't even know who they are.
True,
but they've been fun to watch. I have enjoyed the team.
What do you see on the horizon for WBVP? Anything you can share with us, or just even a vision that you have? I get the feeling with you that you so believe and love what you do that if it stayed just as it was forever, you'd be completely satisfied and happy. I don't mean that in a negative way, but I'm saying that you love the medium so much.
No, my problem is I have to weed through my ideas.
I'm aware.
And or sometimes my wife helps me weed through them and tells me, Cynthia, very lovely lady. She's very good at telling me, Mark, no.
Well, you can't be more honest than that.
It's very easy to understand. No. One of the reasons I've done okay, I guess, is I have had an ability to think of the next big idea.
Okay.
The next kind of cool thing that's coming down. And one thing where and I have a couple of I always have about 3 or 4 ideas, and some of the things that I'm thinking about right now that we're going to do in the future is and my mother will really like this because she likes to listen to radio stations on those Alexas and Googles and those little dot things or whatever they are. Yeah. Where you can ask them to play something. Well, we're not there yet.
Okay.
But we need to be. That's how people listen to the radio in the house now. They don't tune in a dial like this. They just talk to a device.
Okay. So you're looking at possible streaming options.
Yeah, we're streaming and then buying the words and licensing the words so we can be on Amazon and Google.
Oh, really?
That sort of stuff. And that's not really, that's an obvious thing. I've always had the goofy little pipe dream in my mind, because you know how I like to collect old audio equipment.
Oh, I'm aware.
And things like that. And I've already turned the radio station into somewhat of a museum.
It is a museum.
Well, it was already a museum. That's how old our equipment is. I just added to it. I started bringing more junk in. But that's what I like. It gives me a place to display it.
Right.
And so I always had this vision in my mind of like a really cool restaurant, maybe a bar and a restaurant that would, and I think I always thought I would call it like the Broadcast Brew Works or something like that.
Okay.
And have, maybe a restaurant in one of these grand old buildings in Beaver County, and like with the theme of displaying all of the old equipment.
Got it.
And possibly like a Broadcasters Hall of Fame, like all in the same place.
A Broadcasters Hall of Fame.
Like people that have worked at our station.
Right.
And Eric, the total is now 398 as I've done the research
through
the years.
Almost 400 people.
Yeah.
Wow.
That we have names and records of and pictures of most of them. Yeah. And, maybe a Broadcasters Hall of Fame with just our station. I don't know. Maybe with all of Western Pennsylvania.
Right.
And something that could actually be like a tourist attraction.
Got it.
So I think about that a lot. I don't have any idea how to run a restaurant, how to even do that. Someone else would have.
Look out.
Put the stations in, maybe let them broadcast in, but maybe not. Maybe that's a separate thing. That's something that I toy around with. That's probably not happening this next year.
When I host my show down at the new restaurant, right? Saturday mornings.
In other cities, in other areas, you see these big old themed places.
Right.
That are remodeled and really slick and really cool, and I just see I bet that would be fun. Would be like your studio here a little bit. Kind of like this with on this type of presentation, but with a restaurant in it with it. We got approved for another FM radio station, 95.7. I mentioned that was one of the second ones.
Okay.
And I have about a year and a half left to get that one on the air. So I think in the near future, I'm going to work at getting that one designed and submitted and approved to put on the towers where our Ambridge station is.
Okay.
And the towers in Bell Acres.
Okay.
So that I think is going to be interesting, depending on.
Would you run unique content on that one, or did you just?
We may. Okay. I mean that's depending on. I don't know how big the signal's going to be able to. What's going to be able to happen down in there? That's a more congested area as far as the airwaves. It's closer to Pittsburgh. It's only, I think, 12 or 13 miles away from downtown. It's only about 6 miles away from the airport.
Okay.
And so there's a lot more going on, a lot more stations nearby, and we'll have to see how far the signal that they designed for us can reach.
Okay.
So that's going to be kind of cool, and I sort of have thought, depending on what type of a signal we can get, maybe I would consider creating or separating the stations and putting on some type of an oldies music format.
Okay.
Or something with WMBA in that FM station. We'd still carry high school sports.
Right.
I just all of a sudden saw everybody roll over. Oh no, the end times are here. Such blasphemy. Don't worry. But in other words, why do we already do such a good job with WBVP and the 99.3, and right now WMBA is playing along with it.
Right.
But there might be an opportunity to continue to do the local talk type programming like we do with those two stations.
Okay.
And continue to do it well, but at a complementary format of some music format. Maybe I said oldies. It could be anything.
Right.
Maybe I've heard people say that they miss having an easy listening like Muzak type station. And to which I say, oh, come on, I'm not going to do that.
Is that exactly
But
true?
the reality of it is, Eric,
I get it.
formats that are successful are very rarely the formats that you would like to listen to.
Generally, that rings true with life in general.
You have to think of what isn't being done in your town.
Yeah.
What need can you go fill versus the other way around, which is the tail wagging the dog. Every radio operator in the whole world thinks, well, I have better rock and roll records than that one. You just wait till they hear my records. Well, nights. You're doing something that's already popular somewhere else. Your chances of being successful are not very good.
Right. Good point. Good point.
So there might be a music format that's being underserved. There might be something that's not being done right now that would really fit in and help our community and give the people a listening option.
All right.
And at the same time, age-wise and demographic-wise, be compatible with WBVP. Meaning that if we went and approached an advertiser, it wouldn't be like we're attracting teenagers with this other station and middle-aged and older adults like we do with WBVP. Maybe a similar age group.
Instead of a synergy for the advertisers.
Yeah. And make it an attractive thing with two of them.
It's been good, my friend.
Thank you.
And publicly, I want to tell you personally, thank you for giving me the opportunity years ago. Being on your station has never felt anything other than I was part of that family, and that goes for Frank Sparks, yourself, Matt Durzik. I
think we try to invite you along to more things.
You do, and I don't make many events, but that doesn't reflect how I feel about all of you. I appreciate the opportunity. And there's some Saturday mornings it's a little hard to get up and go down there. I'll be honest with you, because the Friday nights were so good. But all kidding aside, it's been tremendously fruitful for my real estate practice. It has introduced me to not even clients. People that become friends of mine now in Beaver County that I would have never met prior.
I have seen a number of your signs in the area now. When I see one, I have a little pride there.
You should. The medium works well.
Cowden Creek, your firm.
We're doing all right.
I mean, I know that we play as just a small part in it, but you went from being someone that I would not have even been able to tell you if that was a real estate firm or a or a brand of cola. You know what I mean?
Don't give Mike any ideas. That might be the next thing. Who knows?
But in a couple of years' time, it's a well-known quantity, and there are you have a lot of homes listed in Beaver County and just over the line here in Allegheny County, and that's it's been fun to watch that happen.
Well, your station really introduced Cowden Creek in the entire Beaver County. That was the first having Michael on the show. It was my show 100 a year and 4 months ago. So it's been a tremendous ride for me personally, and I just want to thank you publicly.
Oh, you're very welcome.
It's a lot of fun. Come back and see me again, and we'll do this again. This is kind of interesting because, again, he's the station owner, but now he's in my environment today.
I got to behave. I got to pay attention to the house rules.
This is the place you don't have to behave. Thanks, Mark. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. This is really cool.
Awesome. All right, buddy. Until we do this again.
You got it.
All right, pal. Thanks. Thank you all. Mark Peterson, WBVP, WMBA, and, of course, the new 99.3, sponsored by St. Barnabas.
There we go. Got to slip them in there.
There's my tagline. We'll see you.
Bye-bye. This is really cool.
Well,
did you dig it?
Oh, yeah. I thought it was great.
You could have saved me, but you let me down. Yeah.